During my housewarming celebration, my daughter-in-law approached with a warm smile, placing a glass of whiskey before me. "This one's yours, Dad," she said softly. To start fresh. I lifted it, ready to take that first sip, when my granddaughter gently pulled at my sleeve. I set the glass aside for only a second. My son, standing just behind me, absent-mindedly reached forward and picked it up. Half an hour later, the scene unfolding in front of me stole every word from my mouth. Before I go on, I just want to say thank you for sharing this moment with me. If those opening lines stirred something inside you, I genuinely love to hear where you're listening from. Knowing you're here truly means more than you realize. And if stories like this speak to you, consider subscribing so you won't miss what's ahead. One small note: some details in this story have been adjusted to respect privacy and better convey its heart. Any similarities to real people or events are purely coincidental. But the message you're about to hear comes from a very real place. My name is Chris Sullivan. I'm 68 years old. There was a time when that number weighed on me, as if it marked the slow fade into being overlooked in a world obsessed with youth and momentum. But that bright June morning, standing in the living room of my new home in Portland, Oregon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in the 2 years since my wife Eleanor passed away. This craftsman-style house wasn't simply another property. It was a statement. After 30 years spent designing structures for others, studying blueprints until my vision blurred, overseeing job sites under the relentless rain the Pacific Northwest is famous for, I had finally claimed something for myself. I hadn't built it from the ground up. I'd purchased it from a couple heading to Arizona for their retirement. Still, every meaningful detail had been chosen with care. The oak floors caught the morning sunlight perfectly. The living room's built-in shelves were deep enough to hold my architecture volumes alongside Eleanor's beloved novels. In the kitchen, east-facing windows allowed me to sip my morning coffee while watching the sun rise over the neighbors' maple trees. That morning I moved slowly from room to room, fingertips brushing along door frames, eyes scanning the joints where walls met ceilings. Old habits from decades of spotting shortcuts contractors hoped I'd miss. It was all sturdy. It was all mine. At 68, I was beginning again. And surprisingly, it felt exactly as it should. The house held 3 bedrooms. One was mine. Another I'd arranged as an office, though retirement left me uncertain what purpose it would truly serve. The third was for Grace, my 8-year-old granddaughter. Whenever she spent weekends with me, she was a whirlwind of curiosity and laughter, carrying Eleanor's eyes and her mother's fierce resolve. I'd placed a small desk in her room for her drawings, and the stuffed animals she'd forgotten during her last visit sat propped on the bed like a silent panel judging my decorating choices. My son Matthew and his wife Olivia lived just 20 minutes away, close enough for Sunday dinners, yet distant enough to prevent me from hovering, something Eleanor had always cautioned me about. "Let them live their lives, Chris," she would remind me. "You raised a good man. Have faith in that." And I did. I trusted Matthew. He taught high school English, steady, reflective, the sort of son who phoned just to ask how I was doing, who remembered the date his mother passed without a single prompt. At 38, he had carved out a life anyone would be proud of. 9 years earlier, he and Olivia had stood beside the Columbia River and promised each other forever. From the start, they welcomed me in with a warmth that felt genuine. At least that's how it seemed back then. But Olivia, there was something about my daughter-in-law I could never quite define, never quite ignore. She was undeniably charismatic, a real estate agent with a perfectly timed smile, a way of making you feel like the only person in the room. When I mentioned buying this house, she lit up instantly, firing off questions about square footage, market trends, and neighborhood perks as if she were prepping a listing. Ambition had always driven her: luxury cars, designer purses, a taste for the finer things her commissions were supposed to fund. Yet over time I noticed Matthew quietly absorbing more of the bills while Olivia pursued larger deals that somehow kept slipping through her fingers. Not my place, I'd remind myself. Every marriage balances its own books. Then about 3 months ago, over dinner, she casually suggested I consider placing the house into a family trust. "Just for estate planning, Dad," she'd said. She'd called me Dad since the wedding 9 years earlier, but lately the word carried a different weight. Less affection, more entitlement. It'll make everything smoother for Matthew when the time comes. Probate can be such a mess. I smiled politely and steered the conversation elsewhere. I was 68, not 88, and the way she'd said when the time came hadn't sounded like loving foresight. It felt closer to expectation. I brushed the thought aside almost immediately. What kind of man questions his daughter-in-law's intentions? Eleanor would have told me I was overthinking, letting shadows grow where none existed. But Eleanor wasn't here anymore, and the architect in me, the man who could identify a load-bearing wall disguised as decoration, who sensed structural flaws hiding beneath flawless paint, that part of me felt uneasy. It murmured that Olivia's helpfulness might be resting on supports I couldn't yet see. I forced the suspicion from my mind as I stepped onto the back porch. That evening would be my housewarming gathering, my opportunity to share this home with the people who mattered most. Matthew and Grace, of course. My longtime colleague James Fletcher, who'd helped me transition into retirement without unraveling. A handful of neighbors I'd met during the move. And Olivia too. Though I couldn't deny a flicker of hesitation at the thought of her walking through my rooms, running her practiced gaze over my belongings, assessing everything with the sharp, professional eye she brought to every property she entered. The backyard wasn't sprawling, but it was exactly what I'd hoped for. A stone patio where I'd positioned the grill for the evening. The oak tree, the one that sealed the deal for me, stretching its wide branches over the yard like a quiet blessing. Garden beds lined the fence, waiting for spring when I planned to plant vegetables, assuming my knees cooperated with all the bending and digging. Inside, I'd already arranged everything with care. Glasses and plates were set out neatly, furniture angled to invite easy conversation, and a bottle of Matthew's favorite whiskey rested within reach. Every detail had been handled. Everything looked just right. So why was there a faint current of unease running beneath my excitement? Why did my thoughts keep drifting back to Olivia's expression when she mentioned that family trust? Why was I mentally double-checking the strength of my door locks, the security of my passwords, the wording of my will? "Don't be absurd," I muttered into the quiet house. My voice echoed differently here, unfamiliar, carrying a tone that sounded older than I felt. "It's just a party." I glanced at my watch. 6 hours until everyone arrived. 6 hours to quiet the restless feeling and focus on what this day truly meant. After Eleanor passed, I'd worked 3 jobs to make sure Matthew could finish college without debt hanging over him. For 3 decades, I saved whatever I could. This house wasn't merely lumber and drywall. It stood as evidence that sacrifice mattered, that patience bore fruit, that even after profound loss, a man could still create something enduring. Tonight was meant to be about happiness, about fresh starts, about showing my son and granddaughter that I was flourishing, not merely getting by. I stood at the living room window, gazing out at the peaceful street. Maple trees stretched long shadows across manicured lawns. Neighbors strolled by with their dogs. Children pedaled bicycles with the carefree confidence that only exists in places where people greet each other by name. This was my haven, my hard-earned refuge. The reward for years of dawn starts and midnight blueprint revisions, for choosing responsibility over indulgence, so Matthew could choose opportunity. No one could take this from me. At precisely 6:15 that evening, the doorbell rang. I've always valued punctuality. Decades in construction taught me that 15 minutes can decide whether a project stays on track or collapses into expensive chaos. Through the front window, I spotted James Fletcher on the porch, a bottle of wine tucked under his arm, and that familiar grin settled on his face like a well-worn jacket. "Chris," he called as I opened the door, pulling me into the kind of back-slapping embrace men our age have perfected over time. "This place is even better than you made it sound." "You always had an eye for good bones," James said. He was 65 now, a seasoned contractor who'd helped bring to life nearly half the buildings I'd designed across Portland. For 3 decades, we'd debated everything. Load-bearing supports, code revisions, timelines. Sometimes like rivals, sometimes like brothers. Somewhere in all those blueprints and job sites, we'd become the kind of friends who didn't need weekly calls to stay close. The connection just held. "Get in here," I told him, taking the wine from his hand. "You're ahead of schedule." "Wanted a look before the place filled up," he replied, stepping inside. His contractor's gaze swept the room automatically, noting the crown molding, the hardwood floors, the way the western light spilled through the windows. Oak floors, he nodded. Smart. They'll outlive both of us. That's the idea, I said. Within minutes, more guests followed. Frank Morrison, an architect I'd partnered with on a hospital build back in the 90s, arrived with his wife. Helen Tucker, from 3 doors down, carried in a casserole that smelled like warmth and neighborly kindness. An older couple, whose names slipped my mind almost instantly, came bearing sincere smiles that made introductions feel secondary. Soon the house buzzed with exactly the sounds I'd imagined. Laughter weaving through conversation, ice tapping against glass, the comfortable murmur of strangers discovering shared friends or mutual complaints about Portland's unpredictable weather. Speakers on the patio played soft jazz that drifted through the open doors, blending with the smoky scent of the grill heating outside. I was topping off the ice bucket when the doorbell rang once more. Through the window I spotted Matthew's car in the driveway, and my chest lifted the way it always had since the day he was born. That sudden swell of happiness that came from knowing my son was close. Grace flew through the door first, all pink dresses and blonde curls. "Grandpa, your house is huge." I bent down, ignoring the mild protest from my knees, and wrapped her in a hug, scented with strawberry shampoo and pure childhood. "Not too huge for you, sweetheart. There's a room waiting upstairs with your name on it. With the desk for my drawings? The very same." Matthew stepped in behind her, and I rose to pull him into an embrace. He carried Eleanor's height and my solid frame. At 38, he still held that teacher's posture. Shoulders slightly rounded from years spent leaning over students' desks, guiding them through sentences and stories. "Dad, this place is perfect. You really think so? Your mother would have loved it," I replied softly. "Yeah," he said, his voice dipping. "She would have." That familiar shadow crossed his face, the one that always appeared when Eleanor's name surfaced, but he pushed through it with a small smile. "Come on. There's someone I want you to meet." That's when Olivia stepped inside, and beside her was a woman I didn't recognize. Olivia wore a dress that looked unmistakably expensive, tailored and elegant in a way that suggested it probably cost more than Matthew earned in a week. Her smile was polished, almost staged. "Dad, you remember Claire, right?" Olivia said brightly. "She helped coordinate our wedding. I ran into her last week and told her she had to come tonight." The woman extended her hand. "Claire Davidson. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sullivan. Olivia's shared so much about you." Early 40s, I guessed. Dark hair pulled back neatly, the kind of style that signaled competence over flair. Her handshake was firm, her gaze steady and assessing. There was something deliberate about her presence. Not cold, not unfriendly, but precise. The kind of composure I associated more with attorneys or financial advisors than wedding planners. "Please call me Chris," I said. "Anyone Olivia brings is welcome." Still, as the evening unfolded and I moved from group to group, laughing and refilling glasses, I couldn't help keeping an eye on Claire. She asked questions that sounded light but carried weight underneath. She admired the house, then casually inquired about the square footage. She praised the neighborhood, then pivoted to property appreciation rates. At one point she mentioned retirement strategy with an ease that felt less conversational and more investigative. Wedding planners didn't usually show interest in investment structures. I was turning that over in my mind, trying to determine whether I was imagining things or simply noticing what others might miss, when Olivia's voice broke through my thoughts. "Dad, let me fix you something. What's your go-to again? An old-fashioned?" "That's right," I said. She was already behind the makeshift bar I'd arranged along the kitchen counter. Bottles of bourbon and whiskey lined neatly, ice buckets sweating under the lights, the new glassware I'd bought for the occasion gleaming expectantly. She moved with surprising assurance, measuring and pouring like someone who'd done it often. But I found myself watching her hands, watching the way she prepared one glass with particular focus, the slight pause, the subtle glance in my direction, and then the way she set that specific drink aside on a small cocktail napkin, almost as if it had been marked for someone. I noticed it immediately. The way that glass sat slightly apart from the others, set just a fraction of an inch away, as if its placement mattered. Before I could think too much about it, Grace popped up beside me and tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, look what I made at school." She shoved a sheet of construction paper into my hands, covered in bold crayon streaks that could have been a house or maybe a rocket ship. With Grace's artwork, interpretation was always part of the adventure. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that supposed to be my new house?" "It's a castle," she said proudly. "So you'll always be safe." The word safe sent a faint chill across my skin, though I couldn't explain why. I forced a smile and kissed the top of her head. "The safest castle in all of Portland," I assured her. Around us, the party carried on in warm, easy currents. James was halfway through a dramatic retelling of a run-in with a building inspector we'd both loathed for years. Frank Morrison was deep in discussion with Helen Tucker about sustainable design, and apparently Helen had strong views on solar panels. From the speakers on the patio, Miles Davis's trumpet drifted through the open doors, weaving between conversations about rising property taxes and the quickest way to dodge traffic on Interstate 5. It should have been flawless. It was flawless, except for Claire, now speaking with Matthew, yet glancing at me with a look that felt less like interest and more like evaluation, except for Olivia, who had finished at the counter and was now walking toward me, one glass cradled carefully in both hands, her smile so bright it almost stung to look at. The crystal caught the lamplight as she moved, the amber liquid inside shifting gently with each step. Her expression was immaculate, the kind of smile perfected in front of mirrors. I had no doubt about that. It was the expression real estate agents mastered, the appearance of warmth without the necessity of feeling it. But her eyes told a different story. They reminded me of the way contractors studied buildings slated for demolition, calculating stress points, gauging weaknesses, waiting to see which support would give first. "Here you go, Dad," she said smoothly, extending the glass toward me. "Your favorite, made exactly how you like it." She offered it with both hands, almost ceremoniously. "Enjoy." I accepted it, the cool, solid weight of the crystal settling into my palm. The amber drink shimmered beneath the chandelier Eleanor and I had chosen together 3 decades earlier, its light scattering across the glass. "Thanks, Olivia," I said. "You didn't need to put in all that effort. It's no trouble at all." Her smile held steady, flawless, almost rehearsed. And then that feeling returned, a tightening low in my gut. The same instinct that had saved countless construction projects over 30 years. The one that caught a beam set a fraction too low, a foundation sketch that didn't quite balance, a contractor's bid that seemed suspiciously generous. It was quiet, but it was rarely wrong. I placed the glass on the side table instead of lifting it. "I'll have it in a minute. Let me greet a few more people first." For the briefest instant, her expression slipped. Just a crack. Something sharp flashed there. Annoyance. Maybe even frustration. Then the polished smile slid back into place as if nothing had happened. "Of course, Dad. Whenever you're ready." The doorbell chimed again, and I turned toward the foyer, oddly relieved by the interruption. "That'll be David. He said he might be late." I didn't notice Matthew step up behind me. Didn't see his hand reach toward the side table. Didn't see which glass he picked up. By the time I opened the door and welcomed David inside, an old colleague from my early years at Morrison & Partners, Matthew was already across the room near the window with James Fletcher, a tumbler in his hand, laughing about the end of the school year. The evening settled into an easy rhythm. Conversations overlapped, glasses clinked. Grace brought me another drawing, Grandpa's Castle, now with brightly colored flowers framing the door. I wrapped her in a hug, her small arms tightening around my neck, and for a moment the unease dissolved. For a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Then, about 15 minutes later, I noticed Matthew swipe a hand across his forehead. "You all right, son?" I asked, moving closer. "Yeah," he said, forcing a quick smile. "Just getting a little warm here." He tugged at his collar. His cheeks were flushed. "Must be all the people," he added. I frowned slightly. The thermostat was set to 72. Comfortable, balanced. "You want some water?" I offered. "No, I'm fine." He brushed off my concern and turned back to James, but I noticed the brief moment when his hand pressed against the wall for balance. About 10 minutes later, he drifted into the kitchen where Olivia was standing. Through the open doorway, I caught fragments of their conversation. "I've got a splitting headache," he muttered, "and I'm feeling kind of dizzy. Did I knock that old-fashioned back too fast?" Olivia's reply came soft and steady, wrapped in concern. "Maybe you're just coming down with something, honey. You've been pushing yourself with finals." "Yeah, maybe." He rubbed his temples as if trying to squeeze the pain out. I remained in my chair, my own drink still sitting untouched beside me, watching him carefully. The way he moved wasn't right. It wasn't the loose imbalance of someone tipsy. It was slower, labored, as though his body wasn't responding the way it should. 5 minutes later, his nose started bleeding. Not a light drip, a steady stream. He grabbed a napkin and pressed it to his face, but it soaked through almost instantly. He reached for another, then another. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Chris!" James's voice cut through the room. "Something's not right." Conversation died mid-sentence. The house fell into a stunned silence as every head turned. I crossed the distance to Matthew in 3 strides. "Sit down," I ordered. "Lean forward, not back." I scooped up a stack of napkins and pressed them firmly against the bridge of his nose. Decades earlier, after an accident at a job site, I'd taken a first aid course. The basics had stuck with me. But this wasn't basic. The blood kept pushing through the paper, slipping down his chin, staining the front of his shirt. "Dad, I can't." His words came thick, slurred, barely formed. His knees gave out. I caught him before he hit the floor, easing him down as carefully as I could. Around us, someone shouted to call 911. Olivia dropped to her knees beside us, tears spilling freely down her cheeks, her hands hovering as if unsure where to touch. "Matthew, can you hear me? Oh my God, what's happening?" Grace's voice pierced the chaos, high and trembling. "Daddy? Grandpa? What's wrong with Daddy?" "He's going to be okay, sweetheart," I said automatically, though the certainty wasn't there. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Matthew's eyes drifted out of focus, rolling slightly as I kept pressure on his nose. Then I saw it, blood pooling at the corners of his mouth, seeping from his gums. "Stay with me, son. Stay with me." James was already on the phone with 911, his voice steady as steel as he recited our address. Frank Morrison ushered the other guests back, clearing space with quiet authority. Helen Tucker had guided Grace into the next room, shielding her from the sight. The dispatcher's voice echoed through James's phone on speaker. "Is the patient conscious?" "Barely," I answered loudly. "He's bleeding from his nose and mouth. We can't stop it." "What has he consumed in the past hour?" "Whiskey," I said. "Just whiskey. We're hosting a party." "Any medications? Allergies?" "No. None." Matthew's eyelids fluttered weakly. His grip on my hand loosened, then went slack. "Matthew!" Olivia's scream tore through the room, raw, frantic, almost theatrical in its intensity. I looked up at her. Our eyes locked for a split second. They were wide, glistening with tears, but beneath the surface, something didn't align. The emotion felt misfitted, like a facade that hadn't fully settled into place. Then the sirens came. 8 minutes later, the flashing lights of Portland Fire and Rescue painted the front windows red and blue. The paramedics moved with brisk precision, their calm efficiency cutting through the panic. They eased me aside and took over seamlessly. One of them leaned close to the other as they assessed Matthew's vitals. "Possible anticoagulant overdose," he murmured. "Pupils reactive. Blood pressure's dropping," the other responded. "Let's move." They lifted him onto the gurney with swift coordination, securing straps, adjusting oxygen, working with focused urgency as they wheeled him toward the door. I moved to climb into the ambulance beside him. "I'm coming too," Olivia insisted, stepping forward. The paramedic blocked her gently but firmly. "Only one immediate family member can ride along. Meet us at Providence Portland Medical Center." She hesitated, then nodded, tears spilling freely. "I'll get Grace and be right behind you." The doors slammed shut before I could say anything else. I gripped Matthew's hand as the siren wailed and the ambulance lurched into motion. Through the small rear window, I caught a final glimpse of my house, the place I'd waited 30 years to call my own. Olivia stood framed in the doorway, surrounded by stunned guests. Her posture was folded inward, her face arranged in perfect anguish. But I had spent 3 decades studying more than blueprints. I'd learned how to read structures and people. I understood the subtle gap between what was displayed and what was real. And as the ambulance sped through the streets of Portland, my son's life hanging in the balance, one realization settled heavily in my chest. That drink hadn't been meant for Matthew. It had been meant for me. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room waiting area burned against my eyes. Or maybe it was the fear doing that. After what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 40 minutes, the double doors swung open and a doctor stepped through. "Mr. Sullivan?" I straightened immediately. Dr. Melissa Stone approached, her expression composed but grave. She looked around 40, with weary eyes and the steady demeanor of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "How is he?" I asked. "Your son is stable for now," she said. "We've started IV fluids and administered vitamin K. We're monitoring his blood work very closely. Stable for now." She gestured toward the row of hard plastic chairs. "Let's sit down." I didn't want to sit. Sitting felt like surrender. But my legs were trembling, so I lowered myself into the chair beside her. "Mr. Sullivan," she began carefully, "your son was exposed to a significant amount of an anticoagulant medication, warfarin. When combined with alcohol, it can trigger severe and uncontrolled bleeding. We caught it in time," Dr. Stone continued, her tone measured. "But it was very close." The word close landed like a physical blow. "Warfarin," I repeated, the syllables heavy in my mouth. "Are you sure?" "Matthew doesn't take blood thinners," I said quickly. Then my throat tightened. "I do." Both of them looked at me. "I've been on warfarin for 6 years," I added, my voice faltering. "Heart condition." Dr. Stone's expression sharpened. "Is there any chance your son could have accidentally taken your medication? Mixed up pill bottles, perhaps?" "No." I shook my head firmly. "Matthew doesn't live with me. He has his own home across town. He wouldn't be anywhere near my prescriptions." She tapped something into her tablet, thinking. "Then we need to determine how this entered his system. Warfarin doesn't appear accidentally." The automatic doors slid open before I could answer. Olivia hurried in. Grace's hand clutched tightly in hers. Her mascara had smudged, her hair slightly undone, her breathing uneven. "Doctor, please, how is he? Is Matthew okay?" Dr. Stone rose to meet her. "He's stable. We're treating him for..." "Could it have been something from the party?" Olivia cut in, her eyes darting between us. "Food poisoning. Maybe bad shrimp. A catering mistake." "This isn't food poisoning," Dr. Stone replied, calm but unequivocal. "Your husband ingested a substantial amount of warfarin." Olivia blinked rapidly. "Warfarin? But how? Could someone have handed him the wrong medication by accident? Some kind of contamination?" Her questions came too quickly, too prepared. "Olivia," I said quietly, holding her gaze, "let the doctor finish." For a brief second, the room felt very small. She fell silent, her mouth slightly open, eyes shifting from me to the doctor and back again. But something about her questions unsettled me. She wasn't asking, "Is he going to be okay?" or "Can I see him?" She was asking something else entirely. She was asking, "How much do they know?" Dr. Stone checked her watch. "We're transferring Matthew to the ICU for observation. His vitals are stabilizing, but the next 24 hours are critical. You'll be allowed to see him briefly once he's settled." "Thank you," I managed. My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. The doctor walked away. Grace had curled into one of the plastic chairs, hugging a stuffed bear someone must have grabbed from the house in the chaos. Olivia sat across from me, phone in hand, scrolling and tapping, her eyes never quite meeting mine. The waiting room was nearly empty. A janitor pushed a mop slowly across the far corner. A vending machine hummed under fluorescent lights. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. A.m. sleep wasn't even a possibility. I kept replaying the night, frame by frame. Olivia handed me the drink. The way she watched. That flicker of frustration when I set it down. Matthew stepped up behind me. A glass lifted. But which one? Then the blood. The confusion. The sirens. And now this. Warfarin in his system. My warfarin. The realization formed gradually, like frost creeping across a window pane. That drink was never meant for Matthew. It was meant for me. I looked up and realized Olivia was no longer in her chair. Through the glass partition leading to the hallway, I saw her pacing back and forth, phone pressed tight to her ear. Her free hand cut through the air in sharp gestures. Even from a distance I could see the tension in her face. Not grief, anger. She wasn't speaking loudly enough for me to catch every word, but I didn't need to. Her posture said more than her voice ever could. The rigid shoulders, the sharp movements, the frustration she wasn't even trying to hide. That wasn't the expression of a terrified wife. That was the expression of someone whose plan had unraveled. I stood and walked quietly toward the hallway, stopping just out of sight near the corner. Her voice slipped through the narrow gap in the door. "I don't care what you think. It wasn't supposed to. No. Listen to me." She froze mid-sentence and turned. Our eyes locked through the glass. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she ended the call abruptly, slid the phone into her pocket, and composed herself before walking back into the waiting room. By the time she reached her chair, her face had rearranged itself into something fragile and trembling. "That was my sister," she said with a shaky smile. "She's just worried." I nodded once, and said nothing. Outside the windows, the sky began to pale. June mornings in Portland arrive slowly, but they always arrive. A faint wash of blue edged the horizon. Just after 5 a.m., Dr. Stone returned. "Matthew is stable," she said. "The bleeding has stopped. You can see him briefly." Relief moved through me, but it was heavy, not light. I followed her through a series of sterile hallways into the ICU. Machines hummed softly. The air smelled of antiseptic and quiet urgency. Matthew lay in a narrow hospital bed, his skin nearly as white as the sheets. Tubes ran from his arms. Monitors blinked steadily beside him. His chest rose and fell, alive. I pulled a chair close and took his hand. It felt cool. "I don't know what happened last night, son," I murmured, "but I'm going to find out." He didn't respond. Only the steady beeping of the monitors answered me. When I returned to the waiting area, Olivia was stretched across 2 plastic chairs, apparently asleep. Her phone was still clutched in her hand. Her face looked calm, almost delicate in the early morning light, the perfect image of a devoted, exhausted wife. But I had seen that call. I had seen the look in her eyes before the tears ever formed. And for the first time in 9 years, I found myself questioning who my son had truly married. I returned home close to noon the following day. The house felt frozen in time, like a crime scene no one had processed yet. Plastic cups were scattered across the coffee table. Half-eaten plates sat abandoned on the kitchen counter. A strand of decorative lights drooped unevenly over the mantel, as if someone had brushed past in a rush. The faint scent of whiskey and barbecue smoke still lingered in the air, but it didn't feel like my celebration anymore. Everything looked different now. I moved slowly through the living room, observing the space the way I used to study architectural plans, measuring distances, noting positions, filing away details, the side table where I had set my drink, the exact spot where Matthew's knees had buckled, the doorway where Olivia had stood, hands covering her mouth, tears falling on cue. In the kitchen, the whiskey bottle remained on the counter, precisely where she had left it. I picked it up carefully and turned it toward the light. An expensive label. Woodford Reserve, still about 2/3 full. I opened a drawer, found a Ziploc bag, and slid the bottle inside before sealing it tight. Then I grabbed a black Sharpie from the junk drawer and wrote in firm block letters, June 8, 2024, housewarming party, whiskey, Olivia old habits. Label everything, document everything. I placed the sealed bag back on the counter and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. The medicine cabinet looked exactly as it always did. Organized alphabetically, each prescription bottle lined up with deliberate precision. I'd kept it that way since Eleanor passed. Order had been the one thing I could control. I reached for the warfarin bottle. Orange cap, white label, Christopher Sullivan, warfarin, 5 milligrams. Take 1 tablet daily. I twisted off the cap and poured the pills onto the counter. Then I counted. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22, 22 pills. I counted again, slower this time, arranging them into neat rows of 5, 22. The prescription had been refilled 2 weeks earlier, May 26th. I took exactly 1 pill every morning with breakfast. No exceptions. I should have had 28 pills left. There were only 22, 6 tablets were missing. I opened the drawer beneath the sink and pulled out my medication log, a small notebook where I recorded every single dose. Eleanor had insisted on it years ago after I accidentally took a double dose one morning. Since then, I'd marked each day with a careful check. No guessing, no memory lapses. I flipped to May 26, the refill date. Every day since then was accounted for. One check mark per morning. No skipped doses. No duplicates. No mistakes. Someone had taken those pills. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, the orange prescription bottle still clutched in my hand, and forced myself to slow my breathing. Think clearly. Who had been inside this house in the past 2 weeks? Matthew and Olivia had come over for dinner once. Grace used the guest bathroom, but I'd been nearby the entire time. James Fletcher had stopped in to drop off some old project plans, but he never left the living room. Then the memory struck hard enough to make me flinch. 3 days before the party, Olivia had come by alone. She'd said she wanted to start setting up decorations early, get ahead of things. I'd been in the garage sorting tools and hardware bins. She'd been inside, alone, for nearly 20 minutes. She would have had full access to this bathroom, this cabinet, this bottle. I rose slowly and walked back to the kitchen. The house felt quieter now, heavier. I opened my laptop and typed, warfarin therapeutic dose versus toxic dose. The search results filled the screen. I read carefully, scanning numbers the way I once scanned structural calculations. Therapeutic dose, 5 milligrams daily. 6 missing pills, 30 milligrams total, crushed into a drink, combined with alcohol. Enough to trigger uncontrolled bleeding in someone who wasn't stabilized on the medication. Enough to cause catastrophic harm, possibly worse. I shut the laptop and stared at the whiskey bottle sealed inside the Ziploc bag. I needed proof. I needed something undeniable. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Michael Torres. We had worked together 2 decades earlier on a bridge project up in Seattle. After that, Michael had shifted into forensic engineering, investigating structural collapses, analyzing failures, testifying in court when things went wrong. If anyone knew how to get something examined quietly, it would be him. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Chris Sullivan. That's a name I haven't seen in a while. Hey Michael. I need a favor. Silence lingered on the other end. What kind of favor? I need something analyzed. Quietly. Off the books. No official trail. Another pause. Longer this time. Chris. What's going on? I can't explain yet, I said evenly. But I need to know if there's warfarin in a bottle of whiskey. And I need to know quickly. He let out a slow breath. Jesus, Chris. Can you help me or not? A beat passed. Yeah. I know a private lab in Southeast Portland. They handle contract work for law firms. Insurance disputes. Discretion's part of the service. I'll text you the address. Thank you. I owe you. He hesitated. Chris, whatever this is, be careful. I will. I ended the call. A minute later, the address came through. That afternoon, I drove across town to the location he'd sent. The building was plain, almost forgettable, tucked between a warehouse and a tire shop in an industrial stretch of Southeast Portland. No signage. Just a street number bolted beside a steel door. Inside, the reception area was sterile and quiet. A woman in a white lab coat stepped up to the counter. She didn't ask for identification, didn't ask for context. I placed the Ziploc bag on the desk. I need this tested, I said. She took it without comment, wrote down my phone number on a form and said, 3 to 5 business days. I'll pay for expedited results. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. 2 days. It'll cost extra. That's fine. She nodded once and carried the bag through a secured door without another word. That's fine, I said. She gave a single nod. We'll contact you. I drove home as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the street. The house felt hollow when I stepped inside. Matthew remained in the ICU. Olivia was at the hospital. Grace was staying with Olivia's sister. For the first time since the party, the place was completely silent. I sat in the living room with my medication log open on my lap, running the numbers again and again. 6 pills. For 30 years I had calculated load-bearing limits and stress tolerances, pinpointing the exact second a structure would give way under pressure. This was no different. 6 tablets, crushed and dissolved into a cocktail, could push a body past its breaking point. Internal bleeding. No obvious warning until it was too late. And Olivia had been alone here 3 days before the party. Alone with that cabinet. alone with that bottle. Now all I could do was wait. 3 days later, the results arrived. I was sitting in my car outside a Safeway, engine off, grocery list forgotten on the dashboard. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. No subject line. Sender, Pacific Northwest Forensics. I should have waited. Driven home, sat down. I prepared myself. I didn't. I opened it right there in the parking lot. The first line made my stomach lurch. Analysis complete. Warfarin detected. I read it once, then again, then a third time. Below that was the concentration level, listed in milligrams per serving. The number didn't register at first. 450 milligrams. 450 milligrams in a single drink. I stared at it until my vision blurred. My hands began to shake as I opened a browser and searched. Warfarin safe dose. The answer appeared immediately. Normal therapeutic range, 2 to 10 milligrams per day. Not in one sitting. Not dissolved into a glass of whiskey. I chose my words the way I used to review structural calculations. Slowly, deliberately, checking for weaknesses before I let them stand. They found a blood thinner in your system, I said. A significant amount. Matthew frowned. A blood thinner. Like what? Warfarin. He blinked. Isn't that what you take? Yes. Silence settled between us. But I don't take anything, he said. You know that. I'm not on any meds. I know. He shifted slightly, wincing as he adjusted against the pillows. So how does that even happen? The doctors keep dancing around it. They say exposure or reaction. Reaction to what? I kept my expression steady, even though my pulse was pounding in my ears. They're being cautious, I said. They don't want to speculate. Speculate about what? I hesitated just long enough to feel the weight of the lab report in my pocket. About how it got into your drink. His eyes locked onto mine. My drink? Yes. For a moment he didn't speak. The machines in the room hummed softly. Footsteps passed in the hallway outside. You're saying someone put it there? He asked quietly. I'm saying, I replied carefully, that the amount in your system wasn't incidental. It wasn't cross-contamination. It wasn't a trace. His jaw tightened. How much? I shouldn't have answered. But I did. 450 milligrams. He stared at me, trying to process the number. Is that bad? The normal daily dose, I said evenly, is between 2 and 10 milligrams. His face drained of what little color had returned. That's not an accident, he whispered. No. The word felt like a stone dropping between us. He looked away toward the window. So either someone was incredibly careless or he didn't finish the sentence. I didn't help him. After a long moment, he looked back at me. Do you think it was meant for me? There it was. The question I'd been avoiding since the parking lot. I don't know, I said honestly. Because the whiskey had been sitting where I'd left it. Because I had poured the first drink. Because if I had reached for that refill instead of him, I forced the thought away. Matthew studied my face. Dad, who was near the drinks. I stood slowly, buying myself a second to think. We're not going to start accusing people from a hospital bed, I said gently. Right now your job is to get stronger. Let me handle the rest. He watched me carefully. You're not telling Mom everything. It wasn't a question. Not yet, I said. Another long silence. Dad, he said quietly. If someone did this, and it wasn't meant for me, he let the implication hang there. I met his eyes. I know. And for the first time since reading the report, the reality settled fully into place. Not just that someone had tried to kill, but that the wrong man had almost died. Matthew leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion overtaking him. Just be careful, he said. I nodded. I will. They said it was some sort of reaction. The doctors are still trying to figure it out. A reaction to what? That part remains a mystery. He searched my face carefully. Dad, are you all right? You look. I'm fine, I cut in fast. Right now the only thing that matters is you getting your strength back. He didn't seem fully convinced, and I could tell he wanted to ask more, but before he had the chance, the door swung open. Olivia stepped inside with a bouquet of freshly arranged flowers in her hands. Sweetheart, you're sitting up. She hurried over, placed the vase on the side table, and pressed a kiss to his forehead. You terrified me. I thought I'd lost you. I observed her closely, the gentle way her fingers brushed through his hair, the slight tremble in her voice when she said the word lost, the tears that shimmered in her eyes at exactly the right moment. It was a perfect performance. "You've been incredible through all of this," Matthew said softly, gripping her hand. "I honestly don't know what I'd do without you." Olivia smiled warmly, but for the briefest second, her gaze shifted toward me, watchful, calculating. I kept my expression unreadable. "I'll be right back," she said after a pause. "I need to take this call." She walked out, already lifting her phone to her ear. Matthew looked at me. "She's really been amazing, Dad." I nodded slowly. I didn't dare trust my voice, because I knew the truth now, and there was no way I could tell him. After I left the hospital, I met James Fletcher at a cafe a few blocks away. We chose a quiet booth in the far corner, away from prying ears. "How's Matthew doing?" he asked. "Physically, he's improving." James tilted his head slightly. "But," I stared down into my coffee, "there's something about that night. It just doesn't make sense." "What exactly are you saying?" he asked. I paused, carefully arranging my thoughts before speaking. "I need everything on Olivia, her past, her finances, where she's been these last few years. I want the full picture." James leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on me. "You think she had something to do with this?" It wasn't framed as a question. "I'm saying I need facts before I start pointing fingers." He stayed silent for a beat, then gave a slow nod. "So what's your next move?" "I'm hiring someone, a private investigator." James let out a long breath. "Chris, if you're right, this could rip your family to pieces." "I know, and if you're wrong," I lifted my eyes to meet him, "then I'll face that too." After he left, I remained in my car in the hospital parking lot. The sun was dipping behind the West Hills, stretching long shadows across the asphalt. I took out my phone and called the number I'd found earlier that day. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. "Morgan Investigations. Denise speaking." "Miss Morgan, this is Chris Sullivan. I'd like to retain your services for a confidential issue." A brief silence followed. "What sort of issue, Mr. Sullivan?" I inhaled slowly. "I need someone to look into." "My daughter-in-law." Another pause, longer this time. "And may I ask why?" "I have reason to suspect she attempted to harm me. But before I involve the authorities, I need solid proof." "When would you like to meet?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll come wherever you prefer." "There's a diner on Burnside, the Tin Shed. 8 a.m. I'll be there." She hesitated. "Mr. Sullivan, if your suspicions are correct, this won't stay simple for long." "I'm aware," I replied quietly. "And if I'm mistaken, I'll handle that as well." I disconnected the call. By then the parking lot had almost cleared out. Above me the sky burned in shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset Eleanor used to stand and admire. I could still picture her at the kitchen window of our old apartment 30 years ago, watching the light fade over the city skyline. She would have known exactly what I should do. She always did. But she wasn't here anymore, and there was no way I could look at Matthew and tell him his wife had tried to kill me. Not yet. Not until I had proof so undeniable he wouldn't be able to dismiss it. Not while he lay in that hospital bed, weak and thankful for her carefully crafted act. So I made the call I'd been putting off, the one that would either confirm my darkest suspicion or prove I was unraveling. "I need you to look into someone," I had told Denise Morgan, "my daughter-in-law, and this has to remain completely confidential." Denise Morgan's office sat on the 3rd floor of an ordinary building in downtown Portland. She answered the door herself, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, the kind of gaze that assessed and filed away every detail about me within seconds. "Mr. Sullivan, come in." The space was neat and professional. Nothing flashy. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk with dual monitors faced the room. Framed certificates and PI licenses hung in precise rows, along with a photo of her shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. She motioned toward the chair across from her desk. I took a seat. "Start from the beginning," she said evenly. "Tell me everything." I explained it step by step. My son had been poisoned during my housewarming party. The medication tampering. The drink that was meant for me. 6 tablets missing from my prescription bottle. My daughter-in-law had access to my home 3 days earlier, and the lab results that confirmed it hadn't been an accident. It was an intentional overdose. I reached into my briefcase and placed the papers on her desk. The lab results. The timeline I had meticulously assembled, marked with dates and notes, the same way I once detailed architectural blueprints. Denise accepted them and reviewed each sheet carefully, her expression unreadable. Financial pressure is often the driving force in cases like this, she said at last. I'll conduct a full background investigation. I provided everything she could possibly need. Olivia's complete name, Olivia Sinclair Sullivan. Her social security number, which I'd retrieved from old tax records Matthew had left in my house years earlier. Her date of birth, her current address. Give me 3 days for initial findings, Denise said. A week for a comprehensive report. What's your retainer? $2,000 up front. After that, I bill hourly. I signed the check without hesitation. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mr. Sullivan, could you come by my office? There are some findings you should review in person. I drove back downtown, parked in the same garage, and rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. Denise was waiting behind her desk, a thick file resting in front of her. She opened it and pushed the first documents toward me. Credit reports. Your daughter-in-law is carrying $320,000 in debt. I fixed my eyes on the figure. That can't be right. Matthew gives her money, I said quickly. And she works. She earns around $18,000 a year from real estate commissions. Denise didn't look up. The debt began before she married your son, about $90,000 at that time. Since then it's climbed to $320,000. She fanned the paperwork across the desk. Credit card statements. 15 different cards, every one of them maxed out. Personal loans, payday advances, store credit lines from places I'd never even heard of. A wave of nausea hit me. On top of that, she added evenly, there have been several recent credit applications. Denise turned another page in the file. Loan applications, she said. Every one of them denied. A few included falsified income statements. I couldn't find my voice. She drew her laptop closer and rotated it so I could see the screen. Search history going back 6 months, she explained. Pulled from the home computer your son and daughter-in-law share. A list of Google searches filled the display. How to challenge a will. Legal standards for declaring elderly incapacity. Oregon laws on inheriting from in-laws. Power of attorney for aging parents. Warfarin overdose symptoms. The last search was dated 3 weeks before my housewarming party. A chill crept through me. There's more, Denise added. 2 months ago, she scheduled a consultation with an elder law attorney, Richard Northrup. What was the purpose of the meeting? I'm still digging. Attorney-client privilege complicates things, but I'll get answers. I sat there, staring at the evidence scattered across her desk. The mounting debt, the calculated search terms about inheritance and incapacity, the inquiry into warfarin overdose symptoms weeks before I was poisoned. The appointment with an elder law specialist just 2 months prior. This isn't just a financial motive, I said quietly. This is planning. Denise met my eyes and gave a single nod. Yes, it is. When I finally drove home, the numbers and dates kept replaying in my head. $320,000. Matthew was completely unaware that his wife was buried under that kind of debt. And in the months leading up to my housewarming party, she'd been researching inheritance laws, ways to establish incapacity, and most incriminating of all, the symptoms of a warfarin overdose. The evidence wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't circumstantial. It was glaring. But I still couldn't walk into a police station. Not yet. Not with this alone. A browser history could be twisted into something harmless. Being buried in debt wasn't illegal. Consulting an attorney didn't prove attempted murder. I needed something undeniable. Evidence she'd opened my medicine cabinet. Evidence she'd crushed those pills and slipped them into that drink. Something that tied her actions directly to what happened to Matthew. Because if I confronted her now, if I took this to Matthew, she would reject every accusation. She'd break down in tears. She'd cast herself as the wounded one. And my son, still fragile in that hospital bed, still thankful for her carefully crafted devotion, would stand by her. Not me. So I did what I've always done. I kept moving. Keep thinking. Keep analyzing every angle. 5 days after hiring Denise, I ran into Claire Davidson again. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I'd stopped at a coffee shop near Matthew and Olivia's house, supposedly to pick up Grace after her time at the park. Olivia had texted me the pickup time. Casual, ordinary. But when I glanced through the cafe window, I froze. Claire was seated in a back corner booth with Olivia. Not just sitting there leaning in, speaking in low intent tones. the kind of posture people take when they don't want to be overheard. I remained on the sidewalk, staring through the glass, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Claire, the same woman Olivia had introduced at my party as an old friend, supposedly the wedding planner who helped organize their ceremony. The same woman who had taken an unusual interest in my house that night, asking detailed questions about its value, my finances, and the property itself. And now she was here, sitting across from Olivia. I stepped inside the cafe, keeping my face angled down, and selected a table on the far side of the room. A folded newspaper lay abandoned on the neighboring chair. I picked it up and raised it in front of me, pretending to read. Old-fashioned, maybe, but effective. Through a narrow gap between the pages, I watched them carefully. Olivia tilted her phone toward Claire, showing her something on the screen. They both leaned closer, their heads nearly touching. Claire then reached into her bag, pulled out a small reporter-style notebook, and began jotting things down. Everything about their posture felt off. This wasn't two friends sharing coffee and memories. This was a meeting, focused, intentional, seriously. Their discussion went on for about 15 minutes. Then Olivia checked her watch, murmured something, and they both rose from the table. No embrace, no lingering farewell, just a brief nod before they exited in opposite directions. I waited until Olivia's car cleared the parking lot. Then I did something I knew was reckless. I followed Claire. She drove a plain gray sedan, nothing that would stand out. She stuck to side streets, unhurried. And I trailed her from a safe distance, about 2 cars back, my pulse hammering like I was playing detective in a bad thriller. It felt absurd. Still, I didn't stop. 10 minutes later, she turned onto my street. Not Matthew's, mine. She parked directly across from my house, shut off the engine, and stayed there. I pulled over 2 blocks away and grabbed my phone. I called James Fletcher. "James, it's Chris. I need a favor. Can I cut through your side yard for a few minutes?" A pause. "Yeah, sure. Why? I'll explain later." I slipped through the alley behind his place, eased in through the side gate, and crouched low behind his fence. From there, I had a clear line of sight. Claire remained in her car, staring at my house. After a moment, she lifted her phone and began taking photos. The front, the side, the driveway, the garage. She wasn't casually observing. She was documenting. For 20 full minutes, she sat there, snapping pictures, scribbling notes, studying the property like she was evaluating it, or preparing for something. At last she started the engine and drove off. I stayed crouched behind James's fence until her taillights vanished around the bend. Then I took out my phone and called Denise. "Mr. Sullivan? There's another person involved," I said. "Her name is Claire Davidson. She was at my party. Olivia told me she was just a friend, said she helped with their wedding plans. But I saw them meeting privately, and now Claire's been parked outside my house, taking photos." Denise didn't respond immediately. "Describe her." "Early 40s, polished, professional appearance, drives a gray sedan. She spent 20 minutes photographing my property from the street." "I'll include her in the investigation," Denise said evenly. "I'll see what turns up." I swallowed. "How many people is Olivia working with?" A brief pause. "Let me dig further, Mr. Sullivan. I'll be in touch soon." The line went dead. I remained in James's yard, staring at the stretch of road where Claire's car had just been. This wasn't just Olivia acting alone anymore. She had assistants. Someone methodical enough to conduct surveillance on my house without drawing attention. Except she had drawn attention. Mine, 2 women, 1 coordinated effort, and me, standing in the thickening dusk, trying to outthink people who had already shown they were willing to cross any boundary. 2 weeks after the poisoning, the call finally came. Matthew was being released from the hospital. I drove there with everything swirling in my head. The debt, the searches, the secret meetings, the photographs. All of it pressing against words I still couldn't say. Not yet. A nurse intercepted me in the hallway outside his room, clipboard in hand. Discharge instructions, medication schedules, follow-up appointments, and, with cruel irony, detailed guidelines for monitoring anticoagulant levels. I signed wherever she indicated and stepped inside. Matthew was perched on the edge of the bed, already dressed in the clothes I'd brought him the day before. He looked drained, skin pale and eyes heavy, but he was alive. "Ready to head home, son?" I asked. He gave a small nod. "More than ready." The drive back to his house passed in near silence. Matthew kept his gaze fixed out the window, lost in thought. I stole glances at him, searching his expression for something: clarity, suspicion, doubt. At last he broke the quiet. "Thanks for being there, Dad. I can't remember much about that night, but I know you stayed." My throat tightened. "Always, son." The moment we turned into the driveway, Olivia burst out the front door before I'd even shut off the engine. "Sweetheart." She hurried to Matthew's side, pulling the car door open and helping him out almost too quickly. "Careful, don't overdo it. Let me support you." She slipped an arm around his waist, steering him toward the house as if he might shatter at any second. Grace came racing out behind her. "Daddy, you're home." She slowed when she noticed how pale he looked, then glanced up at me. "Grandpa, is Daddy all better?" I crouched down and squeezed her small hand. "He's getting there, sweetheart. He just needs some rest." Inside, I guided Matthew to the bedroom. He lowered himself onto the bed with a weary sigh, settling back against the pillows. For a brief moment, we were alone. "Dad," he said softly, staring ahead. "I keep trying to piece that night together. What did I drink? What happened?" Every instinct in me screamed to tell him to pull out the evidence, to show him the lab report, the debt, the search history, to force him to see what I had uncovered. But I looked at him sitting there, pale and exhausted, and I knew I couldn't. Not while he was this fragile. And what if I was wrong? What if accusing Olivia shattered him completely? "The doctors said it was warfarin," I replied carefully. "Somehow it got into your system. They're still trying to determine how. Don't strain yourself trying to remember. Just focus on regaining your strength." Matthew's brow furrowed. "But I don't take any medication. How could that even happen?" he asked, confusion etched across his face. "Sometimes things don't have clear answers," I replied, forcing a light shrug. "Medical mysteries. The important thing is that you pulled through." I managed a thin smile. He studied me for a long moment, as if sensing the parts I was keeping to myself. Then his eyes drifted shut. "I'm exhausted. Get some sleep," I said softly. "I'll take Grace downstairs." In the kitchen, I put the kettle on and started making tea. Olivia moved around the room with restless energy, wiping counters that were already clean, checking her phone, playing the part of attentive wife with careful precision. Then her voice carried from the adjoining room. Low, tight. The door was slightly open. She must have thought I was outside with Grace. I stilled beside the stove, listening. "I told you it didn't work," she whispered sharply into the phone. "He's still alive. We need a different approach." A cold wave washed over me. "It's too dangerous right now. People are paying attention." We wait. A pause. "No, I can't talk here." The call ended. Seconds later, she stepped back into the kitchen. Her expression transformed. Bright, pleasant, effortless. "Dad, why don't you stay for dinner? I'm making Matthew's favorite." I turned slowly, arranging my features into calm neutrality. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was certain she could hear it. "No thank you," I said evenly. "Matthew needs rest. Too much activity won't help him recover." She tilted her head slightly, assessing me. "You're probably right. Quiet is best for him." I hugged Grace goodbye and walked out to my car. Once inside, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, sitting there in silence, trying to steady my breathing. She had made it unmistakably clear. We need a different plan, not I. We. That meant her and the person on the other end of that conversation, most likely Claire. And if there was talk of another plan, then nothing had truly ended. Whatever unfolded at my party, the tainted drink, 6 tablets ground into whiskey, that hadn't been a mistake or a one-time lapse. It was only phase 1. Meanwhile, my son was back home, healing, placing blind faith in the woman beside him. And I carried a truth no one else did. She was already preparing her next step. Collecting proof wasn't enough anymore. Waiting wasn't an option. I needed to put a stop to it. 3 days after Matthew returned, Oilia phoned me. Her tone dripped with syrupy sweetness, the sort that makes you instinctively wonder what it's masking. "Dad, I feel absolutely awful about the party. I really want to make it up to you." I stood in the kitchen, the phone tight against my ear, saying nothing at first. I let the quiet linger, stretching it thin, curious how she would fill it. I know this has been so hard on you, she went on smoothly. Worrying about Matthew, and I haven't supported you the way I should have. Carefully chosen words. That's kind of you, Alia, I replied, measured and cautious. Matthew told me your gutters need cleaning before winter. I've got a ladder, and I'm free Saturday. Let me handle it for you. Matthew had said no such thing. I'd cleaned those gutters myself 3 weeks earlier. Every pipe flushed, every seam inspected. Still, I kept my tone even. That's very thoughtful. It's the least I can do. You've carried so much stress over Matthew. Let me ease some of that for you, Dad. The way she said Dad felt rehearsed, deliberate. Saturday works, I answered. What time? I asked. There was the faintest pause. 10 in the morning. I'll bring the ladder from our garage, the good one, aluminum extension, 24 feet, professional grade. She repeated that last part, like she wanted it etched into my mind. Strong, dependable, safe. Sounds fine. I'll see you then. I ended the call but didn't move. For a full minute I just stood in my kitchen, staring down at the phone in my hand. Every instinct in me whispered the same thing. She was setting something up. Without wasting another second, I dialed James Fletcher. James, I need a favor. Name it. This Saturday morning, around 10:15. Could you just drop by? Maybe say you left a tool here last week. Something simple. Silence hung on the line. Chris, what's going on? Oilia's coming over to clean my gutters. And you think, I don't know what to think. I just don't like the feeling in my gut. Just be there, please. Another pause. Then, steady and firm. I'll be there. Saturday, I was up at 7. I brewed coffee but barely tasted it. I walked through the house twice, studying angles from every window, calculating what could be seen from where. At 9:30, I placed my phone on the living room windowsill, tilting it carefully toward the front yard where the gutters traced the roofline. I opened the camera app, hit record, and double-checked the frame. Driveway visible, the stretch of wall where any ladder would logically rest fully in view. Then I stepped outside and waited. Right at 10 o'clock, Oilia's car rolled into the driveway. Strapped to the roof rack was an aluminum extension ladder. She climbed out dressed for the part, fitted jeans, sturdy work boots, brown leather gloves snug against her hands. A canvas tool bag rested against her hip. She looked convincing, capable, considerate, the picture of a devoted daughter-in-law. Good morning, Dad. She flashed a radiant smile. Perfect weather for a little home maintenance, don't you think? Morning, Oilia. She moved to the back of her car, and with smooth efficiency, unfastened the ladder. Carrying it to the front of the house, she positioned it carefully against the wall beneath the stretch of gutter above the porch. Why don't you stay down here? She said, giving my shoulder a light, almost patronizing pat. Your balance isn't what it used to be. We definitely don't need another hospital visit. The comment stung, sharp and deliberate, but I forced a polite smile. You're right. I appreciate you handling it. Of course. She adjusted the ladder, gave it a testing shake to show how secure it was, then began her climb. The canvas tool bag swayed against her side as she went up. About halfway, roughly 12 feet above the ground, she paused and peered into the gutter. Oh wow, Dad. These are completely clogged. This might take some time. No rush, I called. I'm here if you need anything. She nodded and pulled out a small hand rake, theatrically scraping at the gutter. A few dry leaves fluttered down into the flower bed. I waited until her attention seemed fixed on the roofline. Then I strolled casually toward the front door, stepped inside, and crossed to the window where my phone was still recording. Through the glass, I had a clear, unobstructed view, and what I saw turned my blood to ice. Oilia wasn't cleaning anything. Her hands had shifted to the ladder itself, to the locking mechanism where the two extension sections overlapped. I'd used ladders for 40 years. I knew their structure, how they were meant to secure, and exactly how they gave way when tampered with. From her tool bag, she withdrew a small ratcheting socket wrench, precise, controlled. Then she began loosening the bolts that held the extension sections together. Not taking them out, just easing them back. 2 turns. 3. Then she shifted her attention to the safety pins, the small spring-loaded clips designed to lock the ladder's joints securely when extended. I watched as she pressed each release, sliding the pins halfway out and leaving them barely hanging in place. Not enough to cause an immediate collapse, but just enough that with the right pressure, The right shift of weight, the joints would buckle, the ladder would fold in on itself, and anyone standing on it would go down hard. At 15 feet in the air, at my age, that kind of fall wasn't just risky. It could be fatal. She completed the sabotage in under 5 minutes. The wrench disappeared back into her tool bag. Without missing a beat, she resumed scraping at the gutter, performing innocence like nothing had happened. Then she leaned slightly and called down, "Dad, could you hold the base of the ladder? It feels a little wobbly up here." I didn't move. A second later, louder, "Dad, are you there? Are you there?" I remained at the window, silent, watching every detail. She glanced down, irritation flickering across her face as she shifted her weight. The ladder creaked but stayed firm. She calculated it well. It wouldn't fail under her. Not while she descended, but under someone heavier, or with a subtle shift at the base. It would give way. Slowly, carefully, she climbed down, testing each rung before stepping onto solid ground. "Dad?" she called again toward the house, her voice now layered with practiced concern. I stood frozen at the window, heart hammering, my phone still recording. She was standing in my front yard, after spending 5 deliberate minutes rigging a ladder to collapse, counting on me to climb it or steady it, or make one careless move that would succeed where the poisoned drink had failed. She believed I was too old to notice, too slow to suspect, too blind to see. But I had seen all of it. My hand was just reaching for the door handle, trying to decide how to refuse her request without exposing that I'd been watching from inside. When I heard the low rumble of an engine, right on cue, James Fletcher's pickup rolled into the driveway. He parked, stepped out, and lifted a hand in greeting. "Hey Chris, just stopped by to take a look at that porch railing we talked about last week." We had never discussed any railing, but James delivered the line flawlessly. He glanced up at Oilia still positioned on the ladder. "Oh wow, home improvement day, huh?" She looked down at him, and for a split second I caught the irritation that flashed across her face before it melted into a polished smile. "Just helping Dad with his gutters. I've got everything under control." James strolled closer, hands resting casually in his pockets, carrying himself like a man who'd spent 4 decades on construction sites. "Before you head any higher, let me take a quick look at that ladder. Old habit. Seen too many bad falls over the years. Safety first." "It's fine," Oilia replied, her smile tightening at the edges. "I've used this ladder 100 times. "Humor me," James said lightly, but beneath the friendliness was steel. He wasn't making a suggestion. Oilia descended slowly, stepped aside and motioned toward the ladder with a restrained little flourish. "Be my guest." James crouched at the base, gripping the rails. He gave it a light shake at first, then a firmer one. The shift in his expression was immediate. His features darkened. "Chris," he said quietly, "come take a look at this." I walked out of the house and over to them, forcing my face into calm neutrality. James pointed to the section where the 2 halves of the ladder overlapped. "These bolts are barely secured, and the safety pins, they're not set properly. This entire load-bearing joint is compromised." He pressed against one side to demonstrate. The ladder swayed far more than it should have. Far more. "If someone climbed past the midpoint," James said, his voice turning firm, "this thing would give way. From this height, you're talking major injuries, broken bones at best. Could be a lot worse." I turned my eyes to Olivia. She stood a few feet away, arms folded tightly across her chest, her jaw locked in place. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my tone carefully puzzled. "Oilia, was the ladder like this when you brought it out?" She paused for barely a second, then shook her head. "I don't know, it was fine the last time I used it. Must have already been like this. I grabbed it from our garage. Maybe it's been sitting too long. Maybe something rusted. Or maybe not." James cut in sharply. He crouched at the base, running a finger along one of the bolt heads. "Look at this." He straightened and held up his finger for us to see. Fresh metal dust clung to it. Tiny scratches marked the surface. New tool marks. "See these? Whoever used a wrench on these bolts recently? That was intentional. Someone loosened them on purpose." The air seemed to freeze. Oilia's face flushed crimson. What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone sabotaged this ladder." Her voice rose, trembled. Are you accusing me of doing something?" James didn't answer. He just held her gaze. She turned to me, and I watched her eyes glisten. Real tears, or a damn convincing act. Dad, she said, voice breaking. You can't think I'd do that. Not after Matthew almost died. You think I'd try to hurt you. I held her gaze for a long, deliberate moment. Then my voice dropped, calm and even. I think you should go home, Oilia. Her expression twisted, disbelief and anger mixing. You're going to believe him over me. I'm your son's wife. I'm family. Go, I said again, steady, unflinching. She stared at me, lips pressed tight, fury simmering behind those eyes. Then, with a harsh movement, she grabbed her tool bag and yanked it off the ground. She turned to James, voice icy. Matthew is going to hear about this. The way you people treated me. Drive carefully, I said. She tossed the tool bag into the back seat, yanked the ladder onto the roof rack, careless with the straps, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared, tires squealed as she reversed hard, and then she shot out of the driveway. James and I stood in stunned silence. Chris, he said finally, voice low, tense. What the hell is going on? I walked back inside, grabbed my phone from the windowsill, and returned outside. I had recorded everything. I pulled up the video and handed the phone to him. James watched, his face paling with every frame. Jesus Christ, he whispered. On the screen, Oilia's hands worked deliberately over the ladder. Wrench, bolts, safety pins. Every movement painstakingly clear. He handed the phone back. This is attempted murder. You need to call the police. Not yet, I said. Chris, I need more than this. Or she just tried to. I need enough proof that Matthew will believe me. If I go to him with only this, I explained, she'll cry. She'll claim it's a misunderstanding. She'll say the ladder was already broken, and she didn't notice. He loves her, James. He'll want to believe her version. James stared at me, unblinking. And if she tries something else while you wait, then I'll be ready, I said firmly. Chris, I won't go to my son with half a story. I need proof so overwhelming he can't ignore it. James shook his head. You're taking a hell of a risk. I know, I said. He left a few minutes later, telling me to call if I needed anything. She told me to be careful. I stayed in my driveway, phone heavy in my hand, thinking through everything. I had the lab results proving my drink had been poisoned. I had financial records exposing her desperate debt. I had internet searches about inheritance, incapacity, and now I had video of her tampering with a ladder, trying to cause me serious harm, or worse. But James had been right about one thing. She'd just tried again. Desperate, calculating people like Oilia didn't stop until they either succeeded or were stopped. I needed proof so undeniable that not even Matthew's love for his wife could blind him to the truth. Early Tuesday morning, 4 days after the ladder incident, Denise Morgan called. There was something in her voice I'd never heard before, urgency tangled with confusion. Chris, we need to talk about Claire Davidson. Can you come to my office? This isn't something I can explain over the phone. I grabbed my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Before she told me the truth about Claire Davidson, she said, I need to hear from you. What do you think is really happening here? What's her real role in all of this? Take a moment. Comment below with your theory. Who saw it coming? Quick reminder, some details here are fictionalized for educational purposes. You can exit now if you prefer. When I arrived, Denise had a thick file folder on her desk, laptop open beside it. No time wasted. We ran a full background check on Claire Davidson. Like you asked, she began. I sat down waiting. She's helping Oilia, right? Denise hesitated, studying me carefully. Not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? Chris, Claire Davidson is a licensed private investigator. The words hit me like a punch. My mind froze. What? She turned the laptop toward me, the screen revealing everything. On the screen was a professional licensing database. Claire Davidson, private investigator. License number 47,832. Status, active. Years in business, 15. Below that, business registration documents. An office address in Southeast Portland. Glowing client reviews, all 5 stars. Membership in the Oregon Association of Licensed Investigators. Specialties, domestic cases, infidelity investigations, financial fraud, asset tracking. I don't understand, I said slowly. I saw them together at that coffee shop. They were meeting, planning something. That's what confused me too, Denise said, leaning back. Why would a licensed private investigator be meeting with Oilia? So I kept digging, she continued. She slid a thick stack of bank statements across the desk. Look at this. 3 months ago, March 15th, I scanned the page, a payment to Claire Davidson Investigations. $5,000 listed as a retainer. And the account holder? My chest tightened. Matthew Sullivan. Not a joint account. Not one Oilia could touch. His personal checking account. The one he'd had long before they married. Matthew hired her, I said, my voice feeling distant, echoing in my own head. 3 months before the housewarming party, I looked up at Denise. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know, she said. Then she tapped the bank statement for emphasis. But here's what I do know. Claire isn't working for Oilia. She's working against her. Your son hired a private investigator to look into his own wife. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air is too thick, too hot. I went back over the past few weeks in my mind, every detail clicking into place. Every interaction, every moment I'd misread. Claire at my party, I'd assumed she was Oilia's ally, her accomplice, but she wasn't. She'd been observing Oilia, taking note of her every move, documenting, photographing my house. I thought she was helping Olivia plan something, but that was wrong. Claire had been collecting evidence, mapping my assets, and building a case. Claire meeting Oilia at the coffee shop. I'd assumed they were scheming together, but they weren't. Claire had been questioning her, following her. Maybe both. I had it completely backwards, I whispered. Denise nodded slowly. It seems your son suspected something 3 months ago, enough to hire professional help. Then why hadn't he told me? That was the question that burned in my mind. She closed the laptop. What did Matthew find? And why would he feel he couldn't tell his own father? I stood, legs suddenly unsteady. I needed to talk to him. Chin up, Chris. Denise's voice stopped me at the door. If Matthew's been investigating Olivia for 3 months, there's more going on here than we realize. I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. Matthew had hired Claire 3 months ago. 3 months before the housewarming party. 3 months before he almost drank a cocktail poisoned for me. The timeline made my head spin. What had he uncovered in those 3 months? The debt? The searches about inheritance and incapacity? Had Claire relayed what Oilia was plotting? And if he knew, if he truly knew, why hadn't he warned me? Was he protecting me? Waiting? Gathering evidence? Making sure the proof was undeniable before confronting a truth he couldn't take back? Or was he just hoping he was wrong? Hoping the woman he loved couldn't possibly be capable of what the evidence suggested? I replayed the night of the party in my mind, the way Matthew had stood behind me, the way he'd lifted that glass from the side table, the way he drank it without hesitation. Had it been an accident? Or had he known what was in it? No, that was insane. He wouldn't have. But then, why hire Claire 3 months earlier? Why investigate Oilia in secret? My son knew something was wrong. Something serious enough to spend $5,000 on a private investigator, yet not serious enough or perhaps too serious to tell me. I pulled out my phone, stared at Matthew's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button, and then I set it down. I wasn't ready. Not yet, because if I called now, if I asked why he'd hired Claire, what he'd found, why he'd kept it from me, I'd have to hear the truth, and I wasn't sure I could face it. Not if it meant my son had known his wife was dangerous. Not if it meant he suspected she might try to hurt me. Not if it meant he stayed silent while she poisoned a drink at my own party. I started the car and eased out of the parking lot. I needed answers, but for the first time I was afraid of what those answers might be. The revelation that Matthew had hired Claire Davidson haunted me for 2 sleepless nights. I had to know what he had uncovered and why he hadn't told me. 2 days after meeting with Denise, I found myself parked outside Lincoln High School, where Matthew taught English to juniors and seniors, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to start a conversation I didn't know how to have. The lunch bell rang at 12:30. Students poured into the parking lot, laughing, shouting, heading toward cars or the food trucks along the street. I watched them, feeling old, out of place. Then I saw Matthew. He came through a side door, a canvas messenger bag slung over his shoulder, heading toward his car. He didn't notice me until I stepped out and walked toward him. He froze. Dad, hi son. Hi son. Confusion crossed his features, quickly replaced by concern. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? I need to talk to you. Just a few minutes. Can we grab coffee? He checked his watch, hesitation flickering. Okay, there's a place on the corner. I have 30 minutes. The coffee shop was small and local, with mismatched chairs and tables, student art on the walls. We ordered at the counter and settled at a table by the window. Matthew set his bag on the floor and wrapped his hands around his cup. What's going on? You look worried. I hesitated, then decided to start bluntly. Matthew, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything unusual about Olivia lately? His expression went blank, then defensive. What do you mean? Financial pressure, changes in behavior, anything that seems off? We're fine, Dad. His voice was tight, measured, guarded. Why are you asking? I'm concerned. After what happened at the party, the doctor said it was some kind of drug interaction. He said it too quickly, a freak accident. Matthew went still, eyes fixed on his coffee. The silence stretched long and heavy. What else could it have been? Finally he spoke. I wanted to ask him about Claire, about the $5,000 payment, about why he'd hired a private investigator 3 months before my party. But something in his eyes stopped me. He knew something. I could see it. The way he avoided my gaze, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clutched that coffee cup like he was holding on to a secret he couldn't release. Either he wasn't ready, didn't want to, or was protecting something he couldn't say aloud. I tried a different approach. That night at the party, do you remember anything? Which glass did you drink from? Another long pause. Matthew stared down at his coffee, as if the answer might appear on its surface. No, he said quietly. I've tried to remember. It's just blank. I felt dizzy. Then I woke up in the hospital. You picked up a glass from the side table, I said. Do you remember why? He looked up. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Fear. I couldn't tell which. Does it matter which glass I drank from? He asked softly. It might, I said. He held my gaze for a moment, then checked his watch and stood. Dad, I really need to get back to class. We can talk about this another time. Matthew, another time, I said, voice firm. The final students are waiting, he replied. He grabbed his bag and walked out. I sat alone, watching him through the window. Matthew crossed the street toward the school, then paused, pulled out his phone, and made a call. I couldn't hear the words, but his posture screamed urgency. One hand pressed to his forehead, shoulders tense, every movement sharp and anxious. He paced in a tight circle on the sidewalk. Who was he calling? Oilia? Claire? Someone else I didn't even know about? He spoke for maybe 2 minutes, then ended the call, stood staring at his phone for a moment, and walked back into the school. I sat in that coffee shop for another 10 minutes, staring at my untouched cup. My son was hiding something. That much was clear. But what was he protecting? Me by keeping secrets, by gathering evidence on his own, by hiring Claire Davidson 3 months before my party? Or was he protecting Oilia, out of love, denial, some misplaced loyalty to a woman who might be trying to kill me? Or was he shielding himself from a truth too terrible to face, from the knowledge that his wife, the mother of his child, was capable of something unthinkable? I'd come seeking answers, and left with only more questions. But one thing was certain. Matthew's silence was more dangerous than Oilia's schemes. If my son knew something and wasn't telling me, then whatever he'd discovered 3 months ago was either too terrible to share, or too complicated for me to understand. Either way, time was slipping away. Oilia had already tried twice, the poisoned drink, the sabotaged ladder. She would try again, and if Matthew had suspected it for 3 months, and still hadn't warned me, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. 2 days later, on a Sunday morning, Denise Morgan called. I was in the garage, pretending to organize tools when my phone rang. Her voice was tight, urgent. Chris, I found something. It's worse than we thought. Can you come to my office right now? I was there in 20 minutes. Denise had her laptop open, papers scattered across her desk. No greetings, just a gesture to sit. I got access to Oilia's phone records, text message backups, she said. There's someone else involved. My stomach sank. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a text message thread. The contact name read simply Christine, no last name. Denise pulled up a driver's license photo. The woman in the picture looked like a younger version of Oilia, sharper features, but undeniably related. She was Oilia's sister. I stared, stunned. I hadn't known Oilia had a sister. Most people didn't. Publicly, they were distant. Privately, apparently not. Denise slid a stack of printed messages across the desk. They dated back 6 months. I picked up the first page. The earliest messages were from February, 4 months ago. Christine had asked Oilia if she'd spoken with a lawyer yet. Oilia had said yes, that the lawyer told her if they could prove I was incapable of managing my own affairs, power would transfer to Matthew, and then through him to her. Christine asked what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Oilia's response froze my blood. There are ways to make someone look incompetent. My hands began shaking. The next messages were from March, 3 months before my party. Christine wrote that she'd found a source, someone who could get what Oilia needed, but it would cost $800. Oilia instructed her to proceed and said she'd send the money. A day later, Christine confirmed she'd mailed it, leaving no trace of her own hand. Denise pointed to another document. I followed the trail. Olivia had sent the $800 via money order. Christine had used it to purchase a poison from an online pharmacy in Mexico. Denise showed me receipts, shipping confirmation to Christine's Seattle address. Then a second record. Christine had mailed a package to Olivia 1 week later. She bought the poison, I whispered, and shipped it to Olivia. I flipped to the next page. The messages were from late May, just 2 weeks before my housewarming party. Christine asked if Olivia had received the package. Olivia replied yes, and added, "This Saturday, my party would be the perfect opportunity." Christine warned her to be careful, to make it look natural. A heart attack, a stroke, something believable for my age. Olivia wrote back confidently that she knew exactly what she was doing. My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. The next messages were from June 9th, the day after the party. Christine's messages were frantic, multiple question marks, disbelief screaming through every line. What happened? Oilia admitted something had gone wrong. Matthew had drunk the poison instead of me. Christine's response was all caps. "Are you kidding? Is he okay?" Oilia reassured her that he was in the hospital, that the doctors were calling it a poisoning incident but that he would recover. Christine called her an idiot and labeled it a disaster. Oilia's reply was cold and precise. She knew. She instructed Christine to delete everything, to stop texting her. The last message in that thread, too late for that. "They tried to delete it," Denise said, "but I recovered everything from a cloud backup." I set the papers down, hands trembling too much to hold them. They had planned it together. Denise nodded. Christine supplied the means. Olivia executed it. Classic conspiracy. Then there was one more set of messages, just 3 days ago. After the latter incident, Christine had asked if Oilia had carried it out, if she'd finished what she started. Oilia replied that I hadn't taken the bait, that my neighbor had shown up, and that she suspected I was onto her. Christine had warned her to stop, saying she was going to get caught. But Olivia refused. Not now. I was investigating. She had to finish before I uncovered everything. Christine's final message. "You're insane." I looked up at Denise, throat tight. "This is premeditated murder," I said. "Conspiracy to commit murder." "Yes," she said. "And Christine's involvement means that if we go to the authorities, both sisters could face charges. Do we have enough?" I asked. Denise leaned back. "For the police? Absolutely. The text messages, the money order, the pharmacy records, the shipping confirmations. It's all documented. They can't explain this away." "And for Matthew?" I asked, voice low. She studied me carefully. "That's your decision, Chris. You're his father. You know him better than I do. Will he believe this, or will he find a way to rationalize it?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. I drove home, a folder full of printed messages on the passenger seat. It wasn't just Oilia. Her sister had helped her, found a source for illegal drugs, coached her through every step, knew exactly what Olivia planned for my party, and had only been upset when the wrong person drank the poison. 2 sisters, one inheritance they'd already spent in their minds. $320,000 in debt between them, probably more. They had been planning this for months, since February at least, maybe longer. They bought warfarin from Mexico, shipped it across state lines, timed the execution down to the day and hour, and when it failed, when Matthew collapsed instead of me, Oilia hadn't stopped. She tried again with the latter. And somewhere in Seattle, Christine Sinclair waited to hear if her sister had finally succeeded. I pulled into my driveway, engine off, and sat there staring at that folder. I had everything now. The financial records showing Oilia's debt, the search history about inheritance and incapacity, the video of her sabotaging the ladder, and now these messages, proof that it was all premeditated, proof that she hadn't acted alone. The question loomed, what was I going to do with it all? On Thursday afternoon, 3 days after my meeting with Denise about Christine, the social worker arrived. I had expected this. It was Oilia's next logical move. But seeing the government vehicle pull into my driveway still sent a chill down my spine. I opened the door before she could ring. She was in her late 30s, professionally dressed, clipboard in hand, an official agency badge clipped to her jacket. Mr. Sullivan, I'm Sharon Ellis from Adult Protective Services. We received a report of concern regarding your welfare. May I come in?
I had prepared for this.
Of course, please. I led her into the living room and offered tea. She accepted, setting her clipboard on the coffee table as she sat. I brought 2 cups from the kitchen and settled across from her. Sharon opened her folder. I want to be direct. The report alleges several issues: possible self-neglect, confusion, memory problems, and unsafe living conditions. The reporter expressed concern that you may not be capable of living independently. I kept my voice calm. I understand. May I ask who filed this report? Reports can be submitted anonymously, she said, tone neutral but professional. Then she added, carefully, but I can tell you this came from a family member concerned for your welfare, your daughter-in-law Oilia. Her expression remained neutral. I can't confirm the source, but I'm here to assess the situation objectively. I understand. Where would you like to start? She stood. A walkthrough of the home, if that's all right. I led her through each room. The living room was spotless, organized, clean, no clutter, no safety hazards. The kitchen was immaculate, well stocked with fresh food, everything in its place. In the bathroom, medications were neatly stored in the cabinet, all properly labeled and up to date. Sharon photographed the labels and made notes. You're on warfarin and several cardiac medications, all current prescriptions, she said. Yes, my cardiologist monitors everything, I replied. The bedroom was tidy. The bed was made, no issues. Sharon continued taking notes throughout the tour. Back in the living room, she reviewed her clipboard. Mr. Sullivan, your home is in excellent condition. I see no signs of self-neglect or unsafe living conditions. Thank you, I said. I should also mention that I have some documentation that might be relevant. I retrieved the folder I'd prepared, anticipating this day. Inside were a recent medical clearance from Dr. Raymond Hughes, my cardiologist, dated 1 week prior, results from a cognitive assessment, a mini mental state exam with a perfect score of 30 out of 30, financial records showing balanced accounts, bills paid on time, meticulous organization, property tax receipts, current insurance policies, and home maintenance records. Sharon examined each document carefully. This is very thorough. Most people I visit aren't prepared with this level of documentation. I'm a retired architect. Documentation is a habit. The medical clearance and cognitive test are particularly helpful. They show no signs of incapacity. She closed the folder. Mr. Sullivan, based on what I've observed today, and the documentation you've provided, I see no evidence supporting the concerns in the report. I leaned forward slightly. Sharon, I need to tell you something. I believe this report was filed as an act of retaliation. Her pen paused over the paper. Retaliation for what? May I show you something? It's relevant to this investigation. She nodded slowly. Go ahead. I opened my laptop and brought up the files I'd been carrying like a stone in my chest for weeks. First, the lab results from the whiskey bottle. This shows 450 milligrams of warfarin detected in a drink at my housewarming party, a lethal dose when combined with alcohol. Sharon's professional mask flickered as she scanned the document. Next, the video from my phone, Oilia loosening bolts on a ladder, removing safety pins from the load-bearing joints. I played the footage. Sharon watched silently, her expression unreadable. Then the text messages between Olivia and Christine Sinclair, recovered from cloud backup. The planning, the purchases, the disaster after the party. Sharon read each message twice, absorbing the timeline. Finally, the financial documents showing Olia's $320,000 debt, compiled by Denise Morgan's investigation. I handed her a timeline I'd prepared. Everything organized chronologically from February to the present. Sharon set down her pen. Mr. Sullivan, are you saying your daughter-in-law tried to poison you? I'm saying the evidence suggests it. And when that didn't work, she sabotaged a ladder. And when that failed, she filed a false report with your agency to make me appear incapacitated. Have you contacted the police? She asked. Not yet. I've been gathering evidence, but yes, that's my next step. Sharon closed her notebook. Her professional demeanor remained, but something had shifted in her eyes. Mr. Sullivan, you are one of the most competent individuals I've assessed in 10 years with APS. Your home is safe, your mental status is sound, and your affairs are in impeccable order. This case will be closed as unfounded. Thank you, I said. She stood, gathering her materials. However, I am required by law to report suspected elder abuse to our investigative unit and to law enforcement. What you've shown me constitutes financial exploitation, attempted harm, and filing a false report, he said. These are criminal matters. My chest tightened. I understand. I'll be forwarding my assessment and your evidence to Detective Eric Jensen with the Portland Police Bureau. Expect a call from him within 24 hours. I'll be ready, I replied. After Sharon Ellis left, I stood at the window, watching her car pull away. Her official report clearing my name was already being filed electronically. Olia's attempt to manipulate the system had completely backfired. Instead of making me look incapacitated, she had triggered a formal investigation against herself. Within 24 hours, the police would be involved. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every carefully documented detail, was about to become part of a criminal case. The house I had bought as a refuge had become the center of an investigation. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. I wasn't alone anymore. The system was finally listening. Detective Eric Jensen called at 8:47 the next morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake since 5, drinking coffee and staring at my phone. Mr. Ventus, drinking coffee and staring at my phone. Sullivan, this is Detective Jensen with the Portland Police Bureau. Adult Protective Services forwarded your case to me. I need you to come to the station. Can you be here before 10 o'clock? I'll be there at 9:50, I said. I arrived at the precinct 10 minutes early. The building was institutional gray, all hard surfaces and fluorescent lighting. A uniformed officer directed me to the detective division on the 3rd floor. Detective Eric Jensen met me in the hallway, mid-40s, experienced eyes, professional demeanor. He shook my hand firmly. Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming in. He led me into an interview room. Plain walls, a metal table, recording equipment mounted in the corner, chairs designed for discomfort. Jensen sat across from me and opened a folder. I've reviewed Sharon Ellis's report and the preliminary evidence, Jensen said, leaning back slightly. We need to go through everything systematically. This may take several hours. I have time, I replied. I'd brought everything organized in labeled folders. Jensen worked methodically, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. First, the lab results from the whiskey bottle. 450 milligrams of warfarin, he read aloud. Chain of custody documented. This is solid. Next, Matthew's medical records from Providence Portland Medical Center. Admission date June 8th. Diagnosis warfarin poisoning. Treatment notes show vitamin K administration and blood transfusions. Then your prescription records. 6 pills missing from your medication, Jensen noted. Refilled May 26th. I keep detailed logs. I'm careful with my health, I said. The timeline shows Olia's access to your house 3 days before the party. The video from your phone shows her loosening ladder bolts and removing safety pins. Timestamp and metadata intact. Denise Morgan's investigation report. $320,000 in debt. Internet search history showing queries about inheritance, incapacity, warfarin, and overdose symptoms. The text messages between Olivia and Christine Sinclair, recovered from cloud backup, He paused to review each line carefully. Financial documents showing the $800 money order, pharmacy records from Mexico, shipping confirmation to Seattle, witness statement from James Fletcher regarding the latter incident. Jensen reviewed everything twice, pen moving steadily across his notepad. Finally, he looked up. This is substantial evidence, very well documented. I'm an architect. I understand the importance of structural integrity of evidence, I said. Jensen closed the folder. We'll need to interview your son. He's also a victim in all of this. He needs to know what's happening, I said, my chest tightening. He doesn't know. Not all of it. He drank the poison meant for you. He's both a witness and a victim. We need his statement. Can I be there when you tell him? I asked. Actually, I'd prefer that, Jensen said, reaching for his phone. He dialed, and the call connected to the speaker. Matthew Sullivan? Jensen's voice was calm but firm. This is Detective Eric Jensen, Portland Police Bureau. I need you to come to the station regarding an ongoing investigation. No, you're not in trouble. It concerns the incident at your father's party. Can you come now? A pause. Matthew's confusion came through clearly. Yes, I can be there in 45 minutes. Ask for me at the front desk. Thank you, Jensen said, hanging up. He looked at me. This won't be easy for him. I know, I replied. We waited. Jensen reviewed the files again, while I sipped bad coffee from a styrofoam cup, watching the clock. 43 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. A uniformed officer opened it, and Matthew stepped inside. He saw me first. Dad, what's going on? Why are the police involved? Jensen stood. Please sit down, Mr. Sullivan. I need to explain some things, I said. Matthew sat slowly, eyes flicking between us. Jensen opened the folder and began laying out the evidence piece by piece, building the case like an architect erects a structure. The lab results, the missing pills, the debt, the text messages, the video. I watched my son's face change with each revelation. First disbelief, this has to be a mistake. Then shock, that's not possible. Then horror, the glass. I drank Dad's glass? He whispered. Denial followed. There must be another explanation. Finally, painful acceptance. Matthew's hands shook. Tears traced down his face. He looked at me across the table. She tried to kill you, and I drank it instead. Jensen's voice was gentle. That drink was meant for your father. You weren't the target. Matthew's voice broke. I could have died. You almost did, I said quietly. He processed this, breathing in short, uneven gasps. All this time, she was, oh God, Dad. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Jensen leaned forward. Matthew, did you notice any unusual behavior from your wife before the party? Matthew stared at the metal table, tears dropping onto its cold surface. When he finally looked up, his face was devastated. I need to tell you something, he said. He looked at Jensen, then back at me. Can I speak to my father privately, just for a minute? Jensen glanced at me. I nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside, I said. He gathered the folders and left, closing the door behind him. The sound echoed, leaving Matthew and me alone in that sterile interview room. Gray walls, metal table, the hum of silence pressing in. My son looked across the table at me, tears streaming down his face, and whispered words that made my chest tighten. Dad, I need to tell you this. I've known something was wrong for 3 months. I hired Claire. I've been investigating Oilia since March. In that moment, it all clicked. My son hadn't been blind. He'd been gathering evidence too. Both of us had been protecting each other in parallel, neither knowing the other was doing the same. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, voice barely audible. Matthew took a shaky breath, voice breaking as emotion overtook him. What he told me in that small room changed everything I thought I understood. 3 months ago, I found credit card statements in Oilia's car. I wasn't snooping, her purse tipped over, papers spilled out. I saw the numbers, $89,000 on one card, $45,000 on another. I listened without interrupting. I confronted her gently, asked if we needed to talk about finances. She said it was temporary, that she'd handle it, but something felt wrong. A week later, I overheard a phone call. She was in the garage, thought I'd left for work, but I'd forgotten my lunch. I heard her say, "He's in the way. Once he's gone, everything goes to Matthew." Then she said, "It's ours." His voice caught. I thought she meant divorcing me, taking half. But then she said, "He won't live much longer anyway, just needs a little push." Matthew's voice dropped lower. That's when I realized she was talking about you. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't yet wrap my mind around it. The thought that my own wife could be capable of such things felt unreal. I couldn't accuse her. I couldn't even think of it. "So I hired Claire," Matthew began, his voice shaky. "I found Claire Davidson through online research, a reputable private investigator specializing in family cases. I paid $5,000 from a separate account. Oilia had no idea I was using my teacher's credit union. Claire investigated for 2 months. She uncovered everything, the debt, over $320,000, all of it. She found the internet searches on our home computer. Oilia had been Googling warfarin, overdose symptoms, how long it would take to prove incompetence for power of attorney, inheritance procedures for elderly parents. I still clung to hope for another explanation, something harmless, some misunderstanding. 1 week before the party," Matthew continued, voice breaking, "Claire called me at school. She said, 'Your wife just purchased warfarin illegally through her sister in Seattle. I have the transaction records. She's planning something for this Saturday, your father's housewarming party.'" Matthew's face crumpled, tears streaming. He had been forced into an impossible choice. Confront Oilia, tell me, cancel the party, or follow Claire's plan. Claire had insisted. We needed undeniable proof, witnesses, or Olivia would claim it was a misunderstanding. So Claire came to the party undercover. She pretended to be Oilia's friend, and I watched. Matthew said, his voice catching. I began to realize what was happening. I saw her make the drink. Matthew's hands shook as he recalled the texts. Claire texted me, "Watch your father's old-fashioned. She just put something in the shaker." I moved closer. I saw Olivia place Dad's glass on the table, a napkin marking it. Claire texted again. She put the medication in. He buried his face in his hands, trembling. I stayed silent, letting him speak, letting the truth sink into the sterile air of the interview room. Don't let him drink it. The thought hit me like a thunderclap. 2 seconds to decide. Spill it, and she'd try again when I wasn't looking. Say something, and she'd deny it. We'd have nothing concrete. The warfarin would leave my system in days. I had to act. I stared at my son in disbelief. "You drank it on purpose?" Matthew nodded, his face taut. "I picked up Dad's glass. I drank it while talking to your colleague, made it look accidental, like a mix-up. I knew exactly what would happen. Claire had explained warfarin, the symptoms, the timeline. I knew I'd end up in the hospital. You could have died." My voice was barely audible. "So could you," he said. "And you probably have 15-20 good years left. I'm 40. The math was simple. Once the warfarin was in my system, the hospital tests would document it. Undeniable evidence. I don't take warfarin, you do, and only Oilia knew that. The evidence would point straight to her." His voice steadied, calm but heavy. "I made myself the evidence, Dad. Evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away." My throat tightened. "You sacrificed yourself. To protect me. To trap her. After Mom died, you worked 3 jobs to put me through college. Went without so I could have everything. And this was nothing compared to that." Silence settled between us. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," he whispered. "Claire advised keeping it secret. She said if you knew, you might react differently. Tip Oilia off. I needed to be sure that the woman I married, the mother of my daughter, was actually capable of murder. Now I know, and I wish I didn't." I reached across the cold metal table and gripped his hands. Solid, real, alive. My son. My heart ached, and relief mingled with rage and sorrow. But for the first time in months, I felt a small measure of hope. She looked up occasionally, glancing at the fiery maples, then back to her crayons. Her small hands moved confidently over the paper, sketching shapes that had nothing to do with fear or danger, just the world she was allowed to enjoy now. I breathed in deeply, the crisp October air filling my lungs. For the first time in months, maybe years, our home felt truly ours. Matthew was inside, unpacking groceries, smiling at Grace when she called for a colored pencil. No tension, no whispered warnings, no hidden threats, just father and daughter, rebuilding normalcy. I thought about the long path it had taken to get here. The poisoned drink, the ladder, the secret investigations, the betrayal, the court cases, every sleepless night, every meticulous record, every moment of fear had led to this quiet afternoon. I rested my hands on the porch railing and let the sunlight warm my face. The house, once a stage for deceit and danger, was finally a sanctuary. And for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that the worst was behind us, that Grace would grow up safe, and that Matthew and I could finally move forward. Some battles leave scars, but this one has given us clarity, justice, and the chance to heal. The leaves continued to fall, a vivid reminder that life, like the seasons, moves forward, no matter what has passed, and we were still standing, together. I sank into my favorite armchair, letting the weight of the last 6 months finally settle. Moonlight pooled across the hardwood floors, casting long shadows that didn't feel threatening anymore. They felt familiar, lived in, safe. Every corner, every wall, every room held a story now, a testament not just to survival, but to vigilance, love, and the quiet heroism of family protecting family. I thought of Matthew, of the sacrifices he'd made, of the courage it took to drink that poisoned glass. I thought of Grace, her innocence unshaken, her small hand holding the crayon that had drawn strong roots, safe branches, and I realized that the roots of this family, our roots, weren't in money, property, or titles. They were in trust, courage, and shared perseverance. The house had survived the storm. We had survived the storm. And finally, at last, it felt like ours. The porch light outside cast a gentle glow over the oak tree, the leaves whispering in the night breeze. I closed my eyes and breathed it all in. The freedom, the safety, the love that had been hard-won. Tomorrow would bring normal routines, coffee, chores, laughter with Grace, maybe a visit from Claire or James. But tonight, the house belonged entirely to us. The battles were over, the threats were removed, and the lessons, unyielding, clear, would carry us forward. A home is more than wood and nails. It's trust, it's safe, it's love. And as I sat there, moonlight painting the walls silver, I finally understood. I had claimed not just a house, but a sanctuary, for myself, for my son, and for the family we would continue to build together. This is my home, and no one will ever take it from me again. And to you listening to this family story, remember this. I never imagined the greatest threat to my life would come from someone who called me dad with a smile while plotting my death. God gave me instincts, the cold feeling when Oilia handed me that glass, and I'm alive today because I trusted them. God also gave me a son brave enough to drink poison meant for me, turning himself into living, undeniable evidence. And he surrounded me with people like James, Denise, and Claire at the moments I needed them most. This story proves one thing. You can't ignore warning signs just because they come from family. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're staring at lab results proving someone tried to kill you before you act. Trust your gut. Document everything. Never assume a marriage certificate or blood relation guarantees safety. Some people call revenge ugly. I call it survival. Protecting yourself and those you love isn't revenge, it's justice. When someone tries to take everything from you, fighting back isn't optional, it's necessary. A real family story isn't written in wedding albums or birth certificates. It's written in who stands beside you when the walls close in. Matthew proved that sacrificing himself to save me. That's family. Not the person who poisoned my drink, but the son who put himself at risk to protect me. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. Predators count on your silence, your doubt, and your unwillingness to believe someone close could harm you. Don't give them that advantage. The moment you sense danger, act, gather evidence, build your case, protect yourself before you become another statistic. What I experienced wasn't just dad revenge. It was a father and son protecting each other against a calculated killer. That's the power of real family bonds. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your awareness could save a life. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you handle it? Your experience might be the very thing that helps someone else feel less alone. If you found value in this family story, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. These stories are shared to educate, to protect, and to remind us that awareness can make all the difference. Thank you for staying until the very end. I'm truly grateful you walked this journey with me. A final note: the stories that follow may include fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to exit now and explore something better suited to your preferences. But if you want to learn how ordinary people survive extraordinary threats, and how strength, faith, and courage are built in the darkest moments, then stay with us. And don't forget to subscribe to A Father's Wrath. Join our community, turn on notifications, and be part of a space where powerful family stories are told with purpose. There's much more ahead. Stay aware, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.